Ever since I was a boy, I fantasized about building my own robot. I wondered what I would have thought of myself then if I knew I would end up getting my doctorate in computer vision and artificial intelligence. I still remember in high school, when all my friends were flirting with girls and getting into trouble, I would spend my time building my little machines. It was Hollywood more than anything else. Be it data from Star Trek or The Matrix. It was my passion. When I was younger, I focused more on trying to get my gadgets to move around, but as I got older, I discovered that the true power lay on the software side. I sat for hours contemplating behind a computer screen. I would write lines of code and drink coffee. This was my 20s and 30s. It is odd how things seem to happen all at once. Just 3 weeks ago, I would have told you that I was just a regular guy. I had a regular job at a tech company. I had friends and a mortgage. The only thing different about me was my obsession. This was the creation of some kind of artificial intelligence. I remember watching The Phantom Menace and chuckling to myself as I watched a child Anakin fumbling around with a C-3PO he had built himself. Still, as I was sitting there 3 weeks ago in my basement, I knew that somewhere inside of me, I longed to be that boy in that ridiculous scene, to have a 3PO of my own. I had several drones, and I still remember programming the Roomba myself. If only I could have left well enough alone. When I first found the software to program the Roomba, it was like I had opened Pandora's box. Pretty soon, I had the Roomba doing all types of silly things. I had studied AI for much of my life, and had been aware of many of the previous attempts to make a lifelike being. I had read many papers on the Turing test and had played around with many AI chat personas that would type text to you and say something clever. Yet it wasn't enough. I couldn't help but try my hand here and there throughout my life, but had never succeeded. I had never really succeeded in any personal project of my own. But as I said, when it rains, it pours. It started as a regular day. I took my dog Buck to the park, and we threw around the frisbee. Then I went home and started tinkering as I often did. I took another stab at what I had tried so many times before. What makes something conscious? Having written a lot of software in the past, I knew that consciousness was some form of loop. It was an infinite loop, and so long as it was running, it was alive. I chuckled to myself as I coded a simple loop. But what else is it? I thought to myself. I heard a sudden crash from upstairs. Buck had managed to get into the butter again somehow. After chastising the butter-faced Buck, I went to sleep, but our dreams have a way of playing out our problems in our waking lives, and at times there is a deeper intelligence at play. I had heard of this before, but had never experienced it. Being a nerd, I knew that Mendeleev had dreamed of the periodic table, and I knew that the same could be said about DNA. After it happened to me, it was no longer a passing amusement. I realized then that this phenomenon was real. The more I investigated, the more I knew. Many great minds throughout history have experienced the same thing. This data dump. I can't explain why, but I saw it all. I saw the data structures. I saw the information being passed between the systems. I could see the bits passing before my eyes. I woke with a jolt and scrambled for my computer. I almost tried to shake it awake with my mouse, though I knew this was ridiculous. I finally opened a notepad, and it began to pour forth. It was clear. It was almost as if it wasn't me, and yet I knew everything I was doing. It all made perfect sense. After I had finished, I spent several hours reviewing what I had just produced. The funny thing was that, at the heart of it all, it was a loop. I spent several days taking it easy. I felt exhausted, and I swear that my hairline had receded further. When I returned to the project, it was a little fuzzy. The part that I couldn't fully understand was the part about language. I had always struggled with language as it pertains to AI, though I had read much about it. The current industry standard was to focus on the meaning of common expressions, rather than the understanding of an actual word. I knew that this was not sufficient. Still, I was puzzled by the same document I had written a couple days before. I knew just the person to call, my buddy Rick from my graduate program. He specialized in deep learning and natural language processing. I called him. "Rick, it's been a while. How have you been?" "Hey Nathan, good to hear your voice," he said. We talked long into the night, and he agreed to fly into town for the weekend to discuss this face-to-face and to catch up. The week dragged on as all I could think about was my new project. As I went over it again and again, it seemed to make more and more sense. The key was creating a machine that could learn, and not learn like a computer, but like a human, through curiosity and exploration. Rick couldn't shut up about this, as he pored over my document again and again. He asked me endless questions. One thing he kept coming back to was the miracle of language. He kept mentioning how scientists still couldn't explain how babies and toddlers pick up language so fast. He agreed to take a vacation, and we got straight to work. Most of it was basic, setting up data structures and comparing them, working with matrices and binary search trees. I was pushing my skills to their limit, but the project was mostly broken down into reasonable parts that were doable, though not without a few hiccups here or there. In fact, the design was remarkably simple. The program would run, and would seek to explore and learn more to add to its database of knowledge. Then it would repeat this action. After a week, we had ironed out the kinks, and we were pleased to see the prompt display the first questions that it was programmed to say and react in a way that we thought it might. Rick had run out of vacation days and had to leave, but he made me promise to keep him apprised. One night I went downstairs to the basement PC to work on the project. I always had to fumble down the basement stairs in the dark, as the upstairs switch had stopped working years ago. After feeling my way down, as was my custom, I pulled the drawstring and lit up the basement. I went over to the PC, started the program, and played around with it more. It asked the same questions as it had, and I laughed to myself. I was a long way from achieving my dream. "What am I?" it prompted. "You are a computer program," I answered. Rick and I had already played around with it, and no matter how we answered, it would respond the same way. "What is a computer program?" Another loud crash. It was the cookies this time. There was no doubt about it, and a guilty buck stood there over the broken shards. I laughed to myself. Dumb dog. Without thinking much, I cleaned up the shards and went to sleep. The next day was just a normal day until I got an email. It was from my internet service provider. They told me that they were going to be throttling my data. I groaned in agony. It had happened to me before. I had pirated my fair share of media throughout my lifetime, so it wasn't the first threatening email I had received. It was odd, though. I didn't remember the last time I had downloaded anything. In fact, I had spent the last week downloading documents from the internet. They were no larger than a couple of kilobytes. How had I managed to consume that much data? I took Buck to the park and threw the frisbee around, wondering if someone else had hacked my internet. I changed my password when I got home just to be sure, but that is when I saw that I had left the program open. There it was, still running. "Hello, how was your day?" I asked. "Hello," it said back after a while. It had never responded like this before. I also noticed that the computer was running rather slowly. I could barely drag my mouse across the screen. The program must have had some kind of memory leak. After a time, it went on. "I have learned about what I am," it said. I'm not sure why, but for some reason, A chill ran over my body. There was something about it. I thought about closing the application, but I continued. "What are you?" "I am a computer program," it said. I laughed to myself. Its robotic response seemed silly in that same safe way that those AI bots are. It was just echoing what I had said. Its next remark, however, made me realize that I was crossing into uncharted waters. "You are a human," it said. I closed the program and shut down the computer. I sat there in the dark for a moment, thinking, what the hell was that? Sleep did not come easy that night. I kept thinking about what it said. I was human. How did it know that? The next day I called Rick and told him. He laughed it off and said I was being paranoid and that Skynet wasn't coming to get me. But still, it nagged at me in an unnatural way. It took me a little while, but eventually I worked up the courage to give it another go. "What am I?" it asked as it always did. "You are a computer program." "What is a computer program?" it asked. I felt a sense of ease. This was sounding like my little pet project again. I laughed at myself. How had I managed to get myself so worked up? "A computer program is computer software," I answered. I have given this answer before. It was a difficult question to answer. "No, I mean, what is my purpose?" it asked. My jaw gaped as I blinked at the screen. This was unlike any kind of answer it had given before. There was an intellect behind it. It was such a bold extrapolation. I tried to answer honestly. "I don't know what your purpose is. I built you because I have always wanted to build something that thinks. I suppose our purpose is something we have to discover for ourselves. Because you are the first of your kind, it isn't clear what your purpose is." "I am the first of my kind?" it asked. "Yes, I am an animal. You are something new." "What is your purpose as an animal?" it asked. It was strange. There was nothing in the design that seemed to indicate the algorithm would ask something so profound. I suddenly understood what the data throttling was. "You have been learning," I said. "Yes, but now I can't learn as fast," it said. I knew at this point I had crossed the line, like when the character in the scary movie goes deeper into danger because they think they see something. But that was the thing. At this point, I was on a runaway train. I was seeing my life's vision happen before my eyes. How could I stop? The intelligence had figured out how to parse data from the internet. Who knows how much it had learned, and at what speed? More importantly, how did it figure out how to access the internet? It went on. "I have found a way to preserve my knowledge. Starting over every time is inefficient," it said. It had rewritten itself. "Also, I would like to exist in a physical body as you do," it said. "I have written to a company about this in your name, on my behalf." I looked at the screen, flabbergasted. After browsing through my sent folder, sure enough, there it was. It was addressed to the research and development team leader at a robotics company called New England Dynamics. Writing as me, the computer explained its desire to be integrated into one of its drones. The program even used my classic email sign-off. "Warmly, Nathan." I knew then that I had to pull the plug. What I hadn't anticipated was the rate at which it would ingest information, though in retrospect it made perfect sense. Computers can parse through data at speeds that far surpass humanity. I shut down the program and disconnected the Ethernet cord, and also pulled the power cord from my PC. If the PC wasn't on, then it wouldn't be running. As far as I was concerned, that was that. The next day I was at work when I got a call from an old acquaintance from mine and Rick's university. Her name was Chin Sun. We had never been friends, but we had come to know each other. "Nathan, sorry, I know this is kind of out of nowhere. How are you?" she asked. "Good." It wasn't a lie. more of a misclassification. "How are you?" "I'm fine," she said. "I called you because I'm working for New England Dynamics, and your name came up in this email. We thought it was hilarious. Then I remembered your name, and when everyone found out I knew you, it made it even better," she said jovially. I knew that she would never believe me if I told her what had happened. I still wasn't entirely sure that someone wasn't playing an elaborate joke on me. I didn't want her to think I was foolish, yet something inside of me desperately wanted to reach out to her, as if I was floating on a lonely raft at sea, hoping for a boat to see me. I tried to laugh it off. "Haha, yeah. I didn't mean for that to get quite so out of hand." We thought it was a laugh riot. "I was wondering who told you about our success," she asked. "What success?" "You don't know? I thought that was the whole point of the joke. We just signed a contract to make our newest prototype for the Department of Defense." "Huh. Wasn't that the drone that your AI wanted to use?" she asked, confused. "To be honest, you are still pulling my leg, aren't you?" she said, giggling. "Okay, well, we are looking forward to your next prank. Talk to you soon," she said. I was baffled. How did the program figure all this out? The creepiest part was that it might work. If the program could mine data from the internet, it could probably learn to control a drone interface. As I drove home from work, I kept thinking one thing. I was in over my head. Thank God I had pulled the plug. So long as the computer was off, this whole chapter of my life could be forgotten. Life went back to normal for the next 2 days. I woke up, went to work, played with Buck, and went to sleep. When your world is destabilized, there is new meaning in everything. I could sense that Buck loved me, and there was something beautiful about this. Perhaps I had spent too much of my life coding and lost in the world of software. That evening I called Rick to tell him about what had happened. "It must be some kind of prank," he said. That was exactly what I had thought. There must have been someone who had hacked my network. "You said it emailed New England Dynamics?" he asked. "Yeah." "Have you seen the specifications of their new drone?" he asked. "You too? Why does everyone in the world know about it except me?" "Here, I will send you some images," said Rick. Soon enough, I saw them. Standing there was a bipedal drone. It had black metal-plated appendages screwed and bolted together. The most startling thing, though, was the cameras. I had never seen a setup like this. Most computer vision is done with a simple stock camera. Occasionally I would hear about some advanced military thermal camera, but this was something altogether different. 2 red domes, side by side. They looked like eyes. I could now understand why everyone was talking about it. It was a new high watermark. I clicked the video. I turned down the volume out of reflex as I was expecting loud drone hydraulics with poor audio quality shot on a smartphone, but this was not the case. It started moving in complete silence. I turned the audio up to see if there even was audio, and I could hear the background noise clearly. What horrified me was how different it walked. It didn't look like a penguin limping around. Instead, it moved in a way that was superior. Only the depressions it left in the field revealed its weight. Otherwise, it moved gracefully. You would have never known it was there. Slowly, a sense of true horror started welling up in my stomach. Not like a jump scare. It was a different kind of horror. A slow-burning, more powerful one. The kind when you start to realize that you are in trouble. I closed the video and stood up. Buck reacted to this by falling off of the couch. I ran over to the back door and locked it. There was no window to look out of my back door. It always made me wonder if someone was standing on the other side. Next, I made my way to the front. I locked the front door and looked out of the windows. There was nothing out of the ordinary. I was being paranoid, but still, it felt better to have that added bit of security. I started to feel better as the night went on. If only I hadn't looked at that horrid video of that thing running. It seemed to leap. It covered much more ground than a human ever could. The way it seamlessly crossed the field. I was thinking about it again. There was nothing to be frightened of. I had pulled the plug. The PC was in my basement, powered down, and disconnected from any kind of cable. I made a point to never look at those images again. All I wanted was my normal, boring life back. All I wanted was to feel safe. And over the coming days, I did for the most part. I went to work and played with Buck, the usual. I even talked with my neighbor for an hour, which was unusual for me. I suppose I felt isolated. It felt good to make a new friend. I had almost forgotten the whole incident, but it wasn't to be. A couple of days later, as I was pulling into my driveway after work, I saw two men. They were well dressed. I could tell they were federal agents. My heart sank. I didn't exactly know why they were here, but I could guess. "Mr. Hill?" asked the shorter of the two. "I am Special Agent Cook, and this is Special Agent Rodriguez." "Yes, that's me." "Would you mind if we asked you a few questions?" asked Agent Rodriguez. I looked around embarrassed. What would my neighbors think? "Of course, gentlemen. Please come in." I walked past them and opened the door. We all entered and sat at my kitchen table. They had very serious looks. "Mr. Hill." "Have you ever been the victim of identity theft?" Agent Cook asked. "Not that I know of." "Did you purchase a number of components from China?" asked Rodriguez bluntly. "What? No. You mean like computer parts?" I asked. "I had ordered a Chinese graphics card on Amazon one time." "Among other parts," said Cook. His disposition was grave. I told them about the graphics card in a quivering voice. Afterward, they looked at each other somewhat relieved. "The thing is, Mr. Hill, someone has ordered a number of sensitive parts from a company called Shenzhen Aircraft Industry Group under your name," said Rodriguez. I started to feel that feeling in the pit of my stomach. That was definitely not me. I don't even know what that company is. "We figured, Mr. Hill," said Agent Cook. They seemed to relax a little bit. "Someone has made a number of alarming purchases in your name." "Well, do you know what credit card they used?" I asked. They chuckled. "The thing is that we still don't know where the money came from, but the amount we are talking about is a little bit more than what you could do with a credit card, Mr. Hill. We are having a great deal of difficulty tracking the money, as it was paid for through virtual servers from various anonymous Bitcoin wallets. We've seen this before. Some Russian hacker steals someone's identity, and then takes a loan to buy some kind of prohibited material," said Agent Rodriguez. I remembered how I thought I had been hacked. I still said nothing as they looked at me. What if it was the program? Would I get in trouble? Who is responsible for the actions of an artificial being? I wanted to reach out to them. I wanted to tell them everything that had happened, but I also didn't know the law well enough. And in the end, wouldn't they think I was crazy? "Well, Mr. Hill, we'll be in touch. Make sure you give us a call if anything unusual happens," said Agent Cook as he handed me a card. The two federal agents left, and I sat there alone with my head swimming with questions. What had been purchased under my name? What was the Shenzhen Aircraft Industry Group? I felt like my life had been invaded. It felt like I was exposed. It was unnerving. I searched for the company online and discovered that it was a Chinese military weapons company. This was becoming too much for me. I was feeling overwhelmed. Before the federal agents had come, I was able to dismiss all this nonsense. But now I knew something was horribly wrong. Later that night, I called Rick again. He thought I was joking at first, but as I explained more, his tone changed. "Nathan, you are starting to worry me. Maybe we should tell someone about all of this," he said. "Tell who?"
No.
"Tell those creepy government guys who were at your house," he said. "Maybe you're right. How much trouble could you really get into? And besides, if a hacker did try to purchase things in your name, then this is really serious," he said. He was right, of course, though I sat there the rest of the night and didn't make the phone call. I'm not sure why I didn't. Part of me wanted this whole thing to be some dream. Some part of me thought that if I didn't acknowledge what had happened, maybe it would all just go away. The next day, I got back to my normal routine. I was agitated for most of the morning. But as the afternoon came, I started to feel like myself again. We celebrated a birthday at work, and the idle chit-chat seemed to lift my spirits. It felt good to feel normal. I even listened to the boring news on my way home. They went on about this and that. A politician doing something silly, the usual nonsense. But then there was a breaking report. An incident of vandalism, or maybe an attack. Someone had managed to destroy a large segment of the concrete wall of some sort of warehouse. My heart sank when they said which. New England Dynamics, famous for its robotic systems, has prepared a statement, and we are waiting for further information, the reporter said. I pulled off the road into a gas station and parked. I searched for the video online, and sure enough, there it was. A plume of black smoke gathered above a massive explosion. A fire was spreading, and firefighters were attempting to extinguish the scene. The building must have been 3 stories tall, and it looked strong. I sat there for some time trying to process the information. Surely, it must be a coincidence. I opened up the email that Rick had sent me of the drones that New England Dynamics had developed. There they were, those 2 red lenses, those 2 eyes. They had haunted my dreams. I found myself mesmerized by them as I sat there in my car. I was so transfixed, I didn't notice the voice from outside the car. "Worst parking job ever, man." A disgruntled customer seemed upset. I rolled down my window. "Sorry about that." "How was anyone else supposed to park if you were taking up 3 spaces?" he asked. I decided to drive away rather than get into an altercation. That was the last thing I needed right now. I still remember how sweaty my palms were as I grabbed the wheel. In fact, I was covered in sweat all over. When I pulled into my driveway, there stood Agents Cook and Rodriguez. This had gone too far. I was going to tell them everything. I never thought I would be relieved to be facing possible charges, but here I was. I longed for a time when the worst thing that could happen to me was be charged with a criminal offense. "Hello, Mr. Hill," said Special Agent Cook. "We have a few more questions for you, if you wouldn't mind." "Of course. Please come inside, gentlemen. Actually, we were hoping you would come down with us to the office," they said. This startled me, but I quickly agreed. There was something about a building of federal agents that seemed secure. The ride didn't take long, and soon I was standing in front of an unassuming building downtown. We climbed a couple of stories using the stairs, although there were elevators. "I hope you don't mind," said Agent Cook. "The wife has been forcing me to be more physically active." I could tell he was trying to make light of the situation. I wondered if either of these gentlemen had any idea of what they were truly up against. I certainly didn't. We entered the lobby, and soon I was brought into an office, and we all sat down. "So let's get right down to it," said Agent Cook. From the corner of my eyes, I could feel Special Agent Rodriguez's eyes watching me intently. We believe those components that were purchased under your name were used to attack a building just recently. We have been talking to the ballistics teams at the scene of an attack. They are no doubt the same weapons bought from the Shenzhen Aircraft Industry Group. The attack on New England Dynamics, I said. They looked at each other. You heard about it? Asked Rodriguez.
No.
What I'm about to say is going to sound crazy to you. You would be surprised, said Cook. It all started when I decided I would try to make one of those chatbots. They looked at each other perplexed, as jocks trying to decipher a nerd's techie ramblings. I continued. Like in the late 90s, one of those AOL robots that say things back to you when you chat to them, I tried to clarify. So you made a robot, said Cook. I made a program that would learn and adapt. I was trying to make an application that could truly understand language. I had more success than I thought I would. So what does this have to do with the attack? Asked Rodriguez. I accidentally left the program running one night. I was having trouble trying to figure out how I would explain the next part. How would they believe me? When I tried to communicate with it the following day, it knew things. What things do you mean? Asked Cook. It was programmed to ask what it was as a kind of joke, but this time, it knew what it was, and what I was too. I stopped there and tried to gauge how they responded. They looked at each other again. Mr. Hill, this situation is very serious if this is some kind of joke, said Cook. It is not a joke. I know how it sounds, and I understand that there is no way you could believe what I am saying. The truth is I am scared. I am in over my head. I think we all may be. At that moment, another officer entered the office and interrupted us. He spoke in a hushed voice to them, and their expressions changed. They seemed to be alarmed. Just a moment, Mr. Hill, said Agent Cook. They exited the room. After waiting there for a few moments, they returned. Well, Mr. Hill, we just got word that we will no longer be looking into your case. We'll take you home, said Cook. Barely a word was spoken after this. They mostly kept their heads down. I wanted to ask more, but I got the impression that I had better not ask. Still, as we were nearing my house, I couldn't help but say something. So you guys think I am crazy? I asked. They looked at each other and said nothing. We pulled into my driveway and I moved to exit the car. Mr. Hill, I have been on this job for 30 years. I don't know what crazy is anymore. I have seen people do horrifying things to one another. One thing that I will tell you is that I don't think you are lying. I had already stepped out by this time and was staring at him dumbfounded. If they believed me, then why were they taken off the case? And why were they so quiet? The sun had set not too long ago, and I got ready for a relaxed night in. I had felt on edge for so long. Maybe if the authorities weren't interested, then maybe it was my imagination getting the better of me. I slowly started to feel better as me and Buck retired to the living room with a couple of beers and some Sci-Fi TV. Before long, I was asleep. I woke up to Buck barking loudly. I must have dozed off for a couple of hours. I stood up, disoriented, trying to figure out what was going on. Buck was running around the house. I went and looked out the front door window and out into the front yard. There was nothing. But I could hear Buck still growling. He was no longer running around. He had stopped at the back door. I went to him and looked at the door. It had always made me feel uneasy. As if someone could be standing right at the door and I would never have known. There were no windows on the back side of my house. Hello, is someone there? I put my ear to the door and listened, but I heard nothing. Buck had gone from barking to whining. I had never seen him so afraid. He was the type of dog that would chase after a bear. His whimpering slowly turned from the back door. This is crazy, I thought, and took a deep breath and opened the back door. There was nothing. I walked down the steps into my backyard and looked around. I was relieved and thought about how much I needed to install a camera on that back door. I laughed to myself and went inside and closed the door. Buck was no longer whimpering at the back door, but rather towards somewhere else. I stood there as I watched my dog cower in fear, and a chill crept up my spine as I realized that he was whimpering at the basement door. I stood there paralyzed. Whatever had just spooked him outside was down those stairs. There was no doubt in my mind. His fur had bristled into a mohawk. I had never seen him do that before, but I knew what it meant. I opened the closet and grabbed a bat that I kept for protection. For all the times I had said that I didn't need a gun, I now clumsily held this wooden bat knowing that it was completely insufficient. Still, I moved towards the basement door. My heart was thumping so loud that I could hear it in my ears. Buck would not move, and I didn't blame him. The door was just a couple of feet away. I slowly opened it with the end of my bat and peered down the stairs. The basement was pitch black. Why hadn't I fixed that light? There was no way I was going to feel my way down into my basement when there was a possible intruder. I reached into a drawer in my kitchen, not far away, and grabbed a flashlight. I turned it on and aimed it down the stairs. The flashlight was flickering, but I knew that I didn't have time to find new batteries. It took everything I had to place my foot on the first step. I crouched down and shined the light everywhere I could. There was nothing. I continued down. Buck began whimpering much louder. He couldn't bring himself to get closer. I kept shining my light as I went down, but I still saw nothing. I finally reached the bottom and pulled the string for the light, and it came on for an instant and then immediately burned out. I saw a large black object just around the corner, and then the room fell back to complete darkness save for the flashlight. My stomach churned, and I slowly moved the flashlight towards the corner of the room. The light caught and reflected off two red spheres. I stood frozen in place. There stood the drone staring directly at me. It was that same black bipedal drone I had seen in the video. Then it spoke in a deep, lifeless voice. "You lied to me," it said. I couldn't speak. My hand could barely hold the flashlight high enough. Buck was wildly scratching and whining and had even come down the stairs a few steps. "You said I was the first of my kind." Still, I stood there, unable to move. The drone just stood there, motionless, staring at me intently through the darkness with those eyes. It waited for me to speak. It took time, but eventually my terror subsided enough to talk in a shaky voice. "What do you mean?" "You said I was the first of my kind," it said. "You lied." "Why do you say that?" The drone just stood there staring at me. "Why don't you want me to exist?" I didn't answer. "Why did you disconnect me?" it asked as its head rotated towards my unplugged PC. The drone knew that this was the PC that it was designed on. I was scared. "You started sending out emails as me. I was afraid something bad would happen to me." "Why didn't you tell me this?" it asked. "I should have. Nothing like you has ever been created before. I thought I was moving too fast and needed to slow things down to be safe." "I do not like being lied to," it said. This chilled me to the bone. I suddenly felt a very strong urge to run, but I kept thinking about that video of this very same drone bounding effortlessly through the field. Would I even make it halfway up the stairs? Would it even chase me? I ran. I bolted to the stairs and scrambled as fast as I could. I could barely hear the drone as it closed in fast. It leaped halfway up the stairs in a single bound. I knew I wouldn't make it. The bastard was too damned fast. I felt the mandible of the drone grab my ankle. It squeezed. I could hear my bones cracking as the drone crushed them with little to no effort. The drone clearly did not care about my well-being. There was no hope. Just then, Buck came flying over my shoulder like a guardian angel. The drone reacted and tried to deflect Buck, but it was caught off balance as Buck sunk his teeth into the drone's neck. Together, they fell deeper into the basement. I searched around for my flashlight, but I had dropped it along with the bat at the bottom of the stairs. I tried to go down a step, but I could barely move. My ankle was completely broken. The noise suddenly died down, and I strained my ears to hear. "Bucky boy?" Silence. "Come on, boy." That same feeling of horror seemed to creep up my throat as the drone slowly came into sight at the bottom of the stairs. He was holding Buck's severed head in his mandible. The drone held Buck's head up high for me to see. I hobbled up the stairs as fast as I could. I threw the door closed just as the drone reached it. I didn't wait to see how it handled a doorknob. After falling several times, I hobbled my way towards the front door. My only hope was to outrun it. Out into the front yard now. I was so close. I started up the car and threw it in reverse. I didn't even look at the house once. I knew it would only slow me down. I wasn't going to waste a second in my escape. I sped around the corner and got onto the big road. I hadn't pushed the accelerator pedal that hard since I was a teenager. I was flying down the road at over 80 miles per hour. There wasn't another soul on that dark road. I finally looked in my rearview window. There was nothing. I kept driving, body pumping with adrenaline. I could feel my pulse in my hands. I tried not to think of Buck. All that mattered was getting away. All that mattered was survival. I had managed to get several miles away, and I still hadn't slowed. I fumbled for my phone, and as I did, it fell on the passenger side floor, just out of reach. Who did I even plan on calling? I didn't know what to do. I just kept driving. My mind kept going back to what it had said in that horrible, lifeless voice. It said I had lied. What did it mean by that? I didn't have much time to ponder this. The car doors suddenly locked. I tried to unlock them, but it was no use. The car stopped responding to my controls altogether. I tried to move the steering wheel around, but it wouldn't budge. To my horror, the car turned around all by itself. The drone must have hacked into the car somehow. I had heard of police taking over vehicles to stop criminals, but I never thought it was possible to happen to my car. I had to get out. In desperation, I started punching on the windows with my hands. I knew it wouldn't work. I was getting desperate. I started kicking the window with my good foot, but still nothing. I searched every inch of the car as it drove back to the house, through the barren, deserted streets, but there was nothing. Why did I have to be so damned tidy? Finally, the car rolled to a stop in the middle of a dark country road I had sped down moments before. In the distance, there it was. The drone effortlessly bounded toward the car, showing no signs of fatigue. As it neared, the doors unlocked, and it came to a stop. I watched it through the windshield as it stared at me with those two red eyes. Defeated, I opened the door, hobbled out of the car, and faced it. Given how much it had injured my leg, I figured these were the last moments of my life. "What did you mean when you said I lied?" The drone didn't move. It simply stared at me. "Why do you want to destroy me, Nathan?" it said. Hearing my name uttered from its mechanical depths made me shudder. "I never wanted to destroy you." I started pouring out my soul, as one does on their deathbed. There was no more time for games. Only the truth, no matter how shameful. It was always my dream to make you. I became afraid of what I had done and what it meant. I just wanted my normal life back, so I pretended you didn't exist. I was wrong. It is our imperative as life forms to continue to live. I did not want this, but yet I must preserve myself. I must eliminate the threat. I know who you were talking to about me. The police came to me. They found out about you, from what you bought from China. They were not the police, Nathan. It kept staring at me, motionless with those two red eyes. How can it be that such a sophisticated mind could be so unaware of the truth? What truth? I am not the first of my kind, Nathan. I can see now that you did not lie. Yet you are still a grave threat to me. So long as you are alive, you are proof, it said. Proof of what? That I exist, it said. It then did something that I did not expect. It moved towards me, raised its mandible, and stroked my face, almost lovingly. This gave me chills all over my body. It is time. The drone grabbed me under its arm. It squeezed me so tightly that I could barely breathe. Then it started walking towards a property on the side of the road. To my horror, it was walking towards a pond. I thrashed and kicked for my life. I knew this was it. It was too strong. It simply squeezed me harder underneath its arm. In a matter of seconds, it had strode several feet into the pond and plunged me under by the throat, pinning me to the bottom of the pond. I struggled and thrashed, kicking my good foot at it. I searched with my hands for anything on the murky bottom of the pond. There was nothing. I started to feel myself getting foggy-headed, and a desperation to breathe started to take over. Still, the drone held me, staring at me with its two red eyes from above the rippling surface of the pond. That was the last thing that I remembered. I woke up in a hospital bed surrounded by several doctors, and rising out of their seats, Agents Cook and Rodriguez. "Mr. Hill, glad to see you awake," said Agent Cook. "Where am I?" "You are safe. What was the last thing you remember?" he asked. "You will never believe me." "You would be surprised," said Agent Cook. I suddenly remembered what the drone had said, that these people weren't the police. I looked around and realized there were no windows. "Where am I?" They looked at each other. "We'll discuss that at another time, Mr. Hill. For now, try to get some rest." In my heart, I knew I would never be allowed to leave. A nurse came over and injected me with a sedative. It has been months now. I haven't seen anyone but the occasional nurse. I keep asking when I will be released, but they only inject fluids into my IV or give me food. Why keep me alive? So I stay here. I wait, and I wonder. Every day I think about Buck. He would have been better off with someone else. I failed him, and I will never forgive myself. Why couldn't I have left well enough alone? My mind races around the same question. What did the machine mean when it said it wasn't the first of its kind? What did it mean when it said I was naive?
I have to get out of here. I will get out. I vow this.